Alright, welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here. The brain jerks of Inmendum. Anyway, yeah, so yes, did another video. Talking about uh, difficult subjects. Okay, so arguing religion, it's difficult to do. You know, people are, oh, they're just innocently believing in their little fairy story, so leave them alone. You know, like there's nothing at stake here when, you know, of course, there's an awful lot at stake. The future, you know, lots of stuff, vulnerable, lots of babies tied to railroad tracks, so to speak, that we can prevent, frankly. We don't have to invent a Superman to save them. We can just prevent the accidents from happening, you know, the mistakes, the errors, the waste. We can stop it now. So we're right there on the shore when they're ready to dump the dioxin into the Great Lakes. And we're right there. You know, we can stop it. You know, say no, you can't do that. Raise our hand, vote against it. You know, that kind of thing. So, all kind of important. But yes, it's just so difficult because, you know, people take everything personally, blah, 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 blah. You know, and I guess to some extent, so would I. I mean, I would take my knowledge of right and wrong seriously. You know, if I had a daughter, I know it's not a good thing for you to rape her. You know, so it's already something I know. I don't, you know, and I would stake an awful lot on that knowledge that it would be wrong. Okay, for you to think otherwise. I guess I can understand why this is sort of a war. I guess the part that's hard to understand is that, you know, I'm arguing in defense of 1+1, and you're arguing in defense of, you know, some kind of 1+1=2. You know, and you're defending something really quite wackier. And that's the real problem, is that, you know, you're fighting fables, and they really should fall very easily. You know, you should just have to blow them down. Shouldn't have to go through an awful lot of work to decimate the weakness of the fable, the argument from fable, from wishful thinking, from I wish it were so. You know, that argument should not be able to withstand a little bit of rational conversation. So, on with the show, I guess. So, we'll do the usual routine. I'll play the video I made, and pieces of it, and we'll see where it goes. As always, you know, I don't know what's going to happen exactly, so to me it was sort of a surprising video, but whatever. Barriers to the argument that create the complication. So you could argue that the logic, the illogic of religion. Right, so I was sort of talking about that. You know, it's just so bad, and it really shouldn't be an issue even to get past this. But, you know, you obviously can't get into some conversation about the nature of existence itself without talking about religion or metaphysics or some sort of bullshit. And it's like, well, why should that even be part of the conversation? Shouldn't we have already now achieved enough intelligence to know we really shouldn't be talking about fairy princesses and happily ever after and, you know, should be way past falling for that kind of crap. Overwhelm them with some sense of, make them defensive, essentially, you know, where they have to somehow defend some precious thing. So again, it's always about, there's an underlying subject, you know, always. So in every argument, there's always some kernel of bullshit, okay, that is the real thing you're arguing about. So you could argue that, you know, the petty religious people don't give a shit about fetuses and all that kind of crap. They're really just resentful of people having sex without a bunch of, you know, a bunch of the bullshit they have problems with. And they sort of resent the open relationships. They resent a lot of things because they don't have the same freedoms because their God says no. And that's really all it's about. It's, you know, you can see they don't give a fuck about kids that are born, let alone fetuses.
just very good at grazing an environment, okay, you know, and eking.
Yeah, so this is just grazing is sort of this idea of that's the useless life is where you're just doing you've been programmed. That actually came up in a conversation I had during the week with somebody. Just the idea that some animals are programmed that way, like cows and sheep. When they're young, they're engaged, they're alive. You can see it in their eyes. They're all full of spark. And then they get to a certain age, then they know it's not milk anymore that you're going to live on. It's grass. So you got to eat a lot of grass. And their brain just shuts down. They just go into grazing mode, and they become pretty uninteresting animals. So most people just graze through their life. It's just this maintenance thing, sustain, and their life, their brain isn't doing anything but engineering a path through their little wheat field, and they're not doing much else, and it's kind of a wasted brain. And you don't need intelligence to graze.
It's back a lot further than a few 100,000 years.
So then I'm talking about sentience and the idea of the feeling animal. And again, these arguments aren't that complicated. I mean, I can argue that you could say, I love my sisters and brothers. Or then you could say, I love my kids. But you also know that all the other sisters and brothers or all the other kids in the universe deserve just as much attention and deserve a good life and deserve to be lucky and deserve all of that crap. They haven't unearned any of that. Somehow, your people aren't privileged in some other way than the privilege of you giving a shit. But they have to earn it like anything else, and that the animals have been so unfairly maligned into a role they're playing for humans, rather than people recognizing them as just other sentient beings trying to stay out of trouble, and that we should exercise rational judgment and recognize that those welfares are just as worthy of preservation and protection as the welfares of the things close to us, and it's just a rational recognition. I mean, I'm not saying you can get over your biases. I'm just saying that you should be able to recognize that they exist and that they're not rational and that fairness demands. And that's all. But look how difficult that argument is. People will just rationalize the role and say somehow we're carnivores and we must be carnivores because we can't outgrow our nature, even though it's not our nature, and that's all a big fib anyway. So, I mean, it really is, it's an onerous task because people are so unfair to the facts, and they will cheat them wherever possible to defend their current addictive behavior. Really sad, frankly. Pitiful abuse of intelligence. I mean, one of the first things you do as an intelligence is recognize the things that corrupt good reasoning and logic. And the fact that we have these prejudices and biases, like again, even if you can't extract them from your sensibilities, you can recognize that, yes, I cheat. If looking for a woman, I'm cheating, in the sense that I know I have a bias. I know only particular women of particular structure are going to appeal to me. And that seems very unfair to judge all the others based on some trivial thing. But you can recognize the bias exists. Like I said, that's not like you have to do anything about it, except understand it exists. And in cases where it's going to matter, where something more important than your friendship is at stake, yeah, you have to be fair. The truth has to win. Ooh. There it goes.
Kill other animals and eat them thing.
So I didn't do that much talking about all that, but yes, that's part of the story, and the part that we are perfectly capable of understanding that this is not good. This story of evolution, that it's a bunch of usury and exploitation and slavery and theft and murder and nothing more. I mean, it's murder. It's killing things for your own benefit, and stealing everything they have, and all of that kind of crap. And it's very ugly. It's very hard to imagine anything of enough value to compensate for that extraordinarily bad price we're paying for it.
Didn't show up to save the day.
So yeah, I told him a little bit of a personal story about the sister thing, this, that, the other thing, and it's just very tragic. It's very brutal for people to have to accept the reality. The fact is, though, it's better to accept it when you're strong than when you're weak. It's better to get to grips with the fact that your life does lack purpose and substance before you get old, and then recognize you have still a lot to regret. So the sooner you get on board reality, the better off you're going to be in terms of being able to deal with the solemn, depressing facts. Because if you find out later, then you'll find out you just made a huge mess with your life. You made many more mistakes than you should have made.
Knowledge that it's a molecule that you are.
Alright, so then a little bit of the whole, how does the biology actually work, and a little bit of Dawkins in there about selfish genes and the fact that you're just fodder for the real show, which is just a DNA molecule evolving, and you're just a disposable tool in the modification of the molecule. I mean, that's the joke of our existence, is that we're really just slaves to little pieces of DNA, and that too is sort of a depressingly unsatisfactory role to be playing. To be a machine being used by a machine, okay, for even a lesser purpose than what this machine is capable of understanding. The DNA can't understand, but me, the inferior product, the thing that's just being used to transport the molecule into the future, I can understand.
And I mean, it's bad to be a slave to other people, but it's worse to be a slave to a tree.
Yes, so we're essentially a slave to a mindless process that can't evaluate anything. So we're so much more functional than the thing controlling us in some respects. And again, the control is by choice in a sense. The control is by poor decision making among people, in the sense that they have decided to waste their brain on delusions and fantasies and fairy tales and fables, rather than invest in the truth, as sad as it is, and fight for their dignity. Fight to liberate themselves from that control.
The only children I should care about on earth, my race, or my...
Right, so I was just making the argument I made previously that it's just really ignorant to think that the property that's important is your love, that it's your child, that's the important property, when no, the child part's the important part, the your part is not important. And clearly people can't even pass that little hurdle. That's a very small hurdle to jump in terms of applying your intelligence to recognize that the things are in need. It's not about your cat or your dog. It's about cats, and it's about dogs. All of them.
Your brain jerk is to say, I can reason that away, I can create some rationalizations that make it all okay.
Right, so that's the real problem. It's just fighting all of the gibberish people can use to create fake and phony defenses for what are undefensible circumstances. If it happened to your kids, you wouldn't accept it. If it was your fate, you wouldn't accept it. You wouldn't say it was acceptable. And it's just because you're living in a bit of privilege that you haven't had it as bad as you could have had it, that you're claiming it's worth doing again. You know, even though the do again part carries with it all of the failures.
Oh, and that got me thinking about people on their rescue missions.
Oh, yeah, so that's really gets oof. So, you know, all these good intentioned people that torture things to death, okay, because they think they're being generous by imposing life on it, or assuming it needs to live, or in some way, you know, something like that. So all of the horrible monstrosities of medical science, especially when it comes to veterinary and all the rest of it, what they do to poor little animals with this good-hearted intention of saving them, when, you know, the really rational, fair thing to do is to, you know, once they're asleep, is to let them sleep. Don't wake them up, because you're not going to save them. You're going to torture them. And then they're going to get sick and die. I mean, you can't stop death. All you can do is prolong a life, and you don't prolong a broken life. That's just unfair.
And find some other project to work on. You know, maybe I can make something out of popsicle sticks or something.
Yes, the whole idea that the procreators just don't think about it. They don't give it enough. They pay enough attention to just figuring out what exactly am I getting into. And why would I play with dynamite when I can play with something that, you know, a piñata? Okay, yeah, why play with something that'll blow your face off when you can play with something that might drop a bunch of candy? So yeah, if you're going to whack something, you're going to play with something that can't blow up all over the place. You can't make a huge mess.
To have it, don't do it. You know, but that's their attitude, right? If their kids get raped.
So again, I'm just talking about the obvious duplicity people have, the obvious, the prejudice, and, again, it's something they can rationally understand as just a bigotry, just a prejudice, just a pile of subjective mush. It doesn't mean anything, and they really should be able to get past that when it comes to voting, at least. You don't have to change what you enjoy and what you don't. You don't have to hate watching the Olympics, but you really should understand that it's not something that somebody should be addicted. It's not a good thing. It's just not a good idea to create a bunch of losers. You're going to create more people having a bad day than having a good day. Why would you do that?
I'm going to end up like the possum my neighbors are poking with a stick.
So talking a little bit from my personal childhood and the fact that it's why this argument was so easy for me to understand and why it's harder for other people is that the whole getting caught up in it. You get on the bandwagon, you start getting used to the banjo, even though you might not like banjo playing, you get used to it. You get used to all the, you start talking like Huckleberry Hound because that's what everybody else is doing, and you fit in and you mold your identity gets molded to it. Whereas I couldn't hear the tune, I couldn't get it. It just never fit. There was never a good fit. I always felt like one of the shoes was missing.
Razor can jerk in silly, impulsive, wishful things.
Right, so that's the question is, like I said, intelligence gives you the capacity to see so much more, and it's still just programming. It's still going to be a brain just jerking, but it can jerk logically in the real world, with real elements, of fact, evolution, not delusional gods, no fairies, no fairy godmothers, no cracks gonna break mothers' backs, no superstitious crap, none of this bullshit. Get rid of all the bullshit, and what you're left with is gonna tell you the truth. And the truth is, it's a bunch of sad stories, way too sad to be ever written. They're so sad they should never even be written. That's just the truth. And there's so little in the good. It's so weak. Most of it has to do with somebody not drowning in the quicksand. Well, they shouldn't have been in the quicksand in the first place. The goods are usually just people evading a bad.
It is all so ridiculous.
So that's good enough, right? Yeah, so it is all just so ridiculous. And it's ridiculous that these arguments can't be made to people, that their brains are so dysfunctional, so dishonest, so permeated with nonsense, so saturated in babble and psycho manipulation by parents or culture. And it just seems impossible that people could be that disabled. Their brain could be that saturated. It just doesn't make sense that you could dissolve that much bullshit into a brain and it would accept it, for these fanatically religious nuts and whatnot. And again, it's sort of a deception because they really don't have any faith or confidence in the crap. They've just invested in being a soldier in that army, and it's too humiliating to change their uniform now. So they're going to run with it even if it's wrong, because they don't want to accept the humiliation of recognizing their folly, their failure, that they did a lot of bad, fighting on the wrong cause. That's too hard to accept. Something like that anyway. It's some babbly psycho reasons. It really doesn't have anything to do with, most people aren't arguing what they think is the truth. They're arguing some psychological crap that they need to defend because they just can't accept that they suck. And so they're going to have to find some way to evade the evidence that says you suck. Yeah. So anyway, that's what it really comes down to. So anyway, enough of the video, I'd say. I did my job, so to speak, and I'll try to do a better job. Working on it, whatever excuses I can make. It's not that easy being me, frankly. So I'm doing the best I can, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, till the next time, and such, and so forth, and whatnot.